Taking Care of Yourself with Dr. Andrew Weil continues with Session 2, Enhancing Mind, Body, and Spirit.
In this session, I'm going to talk to you about mind and spirit, the non-physical aspects of your being, their relationship to health and illness. One component of integrative medicine that I consider very important is what I would call whole person medicine. That is trying to shift the focus of medicine away from an exclusive concern with the physical body to looking at the other dimensions of human life, the mental, emotional, and the spiritual. Now, I don't claim to know what the mind is, much less the spirit. I'll give you a few thoughts. When I use the word mind, I'm talking about that part of us that's concerned with thoughts, with emotions, with imagination. I once heard a yogi adept say that all of the brain was concerned with the mind, but not all of the mind is in the brain. I don't claim to know what the relationship between the mind and the brain is, but I know that there are certainly connections there. And if I were addressing an audience of physicians or medical scientists, I might have to spend a lot of time trying to cite studies to support contentions I make with references to scientific literature, to experiments. I'm not going to do that in talking to you because I think most of you, like me, are aware of the mind-body connection. And I think, in fact, one day scientific research will validate our experience. Actually, mind-body medicine is probably the best researched area of what has been called alternative medicine, although I don't consider mind-body medicine alternative in any sense. But there really have been about 3 decades of good research documenting the influences of the mind on the body. As an example of some of the information that comes out of mind-body research, I would mention some of the clinical experiences of people who work with patients with multiple personality disorder, a disorder that was once rare but has become quite common in recent years. And this has to do with physical differences among the different personalities. For example, there have been many cases reported where a person has a significant allergy. Say they get hives within a half hour of eating a citrus fruit. But one of the personalities might not have that allergy. And if that personality can emerge within a certain period of time after consuming citrus, the allergy doesn't happen. That's very interesting. There has even been a case reported of a woman, a multiple personality disorder woman, who had insulin-dependent diabetes. But one of the personalities did not require insulin. I think these differences should be paid great attention to because the picture that emerges from all this is that our bodies, this is the physical hardware of the system, and that you can run different software through it and come out with very different results. Now, how can we explain these observations? How could personality differences result in differences in healing ability? I think actually there are many mechanisms that are at work here. I'm not going to go into great detail about them, but I'll talk about a couple. One is the role of the autonomic nervous system in conveying emotional states to the body, and the other is the role of chemical messengers in serving this function. The involuntary nervous system, which originates in control centers in the brain and then travels down through the body and controls the functioning of many internal organs and many basic body functions, has very clear connections to emotional states. The autonomic nervous system has 2 main divisions: the sympathetic nervous system, which speeds up body reactions, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which slows them down. The sympathetic nervous system prepares us for fight or flight responses. It prepares the body for emergencies. In emergencies, some functions become non-essential. Digestion becomes non-essential, so the digestive system is shut down. On the other hand, it's very important to maintain blood supply to the brain during an emergency because a blackout could be fatal. So blood pressure is increased and blood is shunted away from the surface of the body toward the center of the body to make sure that there's no interruption of circulation. It's been said that many diseases of modern life seem to be the result of overactivity of the sympathetic nervous system. It's as if we are constantly trying to fight or flee from a danger that never goes away. And overactivity of the sympathetic nervous system can be the basis of high blood pressure, of unbalanced circulation, of increased workload on the heart, of arrhythmias of the heart, of many kinds of digestive disturbances. For example, there is a wide range of digestive complaints that really have their origin in a dissonance between the intrinsic motility of the digestive system. That is, all these organs are muscular from the stomach on down through the colon. It's smooth muscle, involuntary muscle, and it has its own intrinsic rhythm. There are waves of motion that go from one end to the other. That motion has to be synchronized with the external control that comes from the autonomic nervous system. If those two systems are out of balance, a whole range of digestive problems can result. One expression of that is irritable bowel syndrome, very common in our society, where people may experience diarrhea, constipation, bloating, indigestion of various kinds. These conditions are not well treated by conventional medicine. We tend to give drugs that in one way or another suppress the symptoms or block function in the digestive organs. They don't really get to the root of this process and change them. I had dinner a short while ago with a leading gastroenterologist who practices in Tucson, who complained to me that 90% of the patients who come to him have conditions for which the methods that he knows are not appropriate. He said that these conditions are what he calls functional conditions, that is, disturbances of function, but not due to any kind of treatable organic problem that he can identify and make go away. That's a very high percentage of cases, if 90% of his cases are of that nature. And the disturbance of function there is this kind of imbalance between the external control coming from the autonomic nervous system and the intrinsic control coming from the musculature of the digestive organs. And where does that arise? What's the nature of that imbalance? Well, it comes from unbalanced functioning in the autonomic nervous system, usually the sympathetic nervous system being too active. And this is a result of anxiety, of internalized stress, of trying to flee from the saber-toothed tiger, except that in our modern world, the saber-toothed tigers don't go away. There are situations on the job, at home, in daily living. There's this constant kind of anxiety and stress that we internalize. This is just one example of how a problem in the mental emotional sphere can be translated to the physical sphere through the autonomic nervous system. Another way in which emotions can translate into physiological states is through the medium of chemical messengers, of neurotransmitters. These are peptides, small protein molecules that act as information signals. They are produced in the brain. They are produced in various cells of the body, travel throughout the body, and bind to receptors on cells that respond to them. And the receptors for these neurotransmitters that mediate emotional states are very commonly found in the gut, which gives a basis for our saying that we have gut feelings about things. They're also found on immune cells, which creates a mechanism to explain the field of psychoneuroimmunology, that is how mental and emotional states translate into changes in immune status. I think most of us have experienced getting a cold at a time when we are under emotional stress, when we've suffered some kind of emotional shock. More serious diseases occur in these situations as well. If you look at people that have rheumatoid arthritis and interview them about the first episode that they ever had of this disease, this occurs in young women. Often the first episode follows right on the heels of a major emotional shock or disaster, and within hours, a person's joints swell up for the first time, become hot and red, and this is the beginning of an autoimmune process that can become chronic and difficult to treat. treat. We can see the opposite of this as well, where if people fall in love, if something happens that makes them extraordinarily happy, reduces anxiety, that immune diseases can recede, can go into remission, that all kinds of physical problems can disappear. So I think there are many mechanisms that can explain these interactions, from direct nervous connections to the involuntary nervous system to indirect connections that are mediated by chemical messengers. The point is that there is a constant two-way conversation going on between the mind and the body, that signals are going back and forth so that one compartment is aware of the other and influencing the other.